AITA for refusing to let my husband's brother move in with us permanently, even though he claims he has nowhere else to go. I, 35F, have been married to my husband, Mark, 37M, for 7 years. We recently bought a house together, a 4-bedroom suburban home, with plans to start a family soon. Our home has 2 bathrooms, a decent-sized kitchen, and a small home office. We worked hard to save for this house, and it's really the first place we've both felt we truly own. Mark has a younger brother, Tom, 32M, who has had a history of financial instability. He's been in and out of jobs, often moving between apartments, and has frequently relied on family for support. Tom called Mark last month in a panic, saying he'd been evicted from his apartment and had nowhere to go. He asked if he could move in temporarily while he looked for a new place. Mark initially suggested he stay for a few weeks, and I agreed because I thought a short-term stay was manageable. At first, Tom seemed fine. He didn't interfere with our routines, helped with some chores, and seemed grateful. But within the first week, he started leaving dishes in the sink for days, piling laundry in the living room, and inviting friends over without asking. When I reminded him of the house rules, he brushed it off, saying he was stressed and needed space. Mark tried to mediate, but it quickly became clear that Tom's behavior was infringing on our home and privacy. 2 weeks into his stay, Tom suggested that he might need to stay longer because finding an apartment that fit his budget was taking longer than expected. I explained firmly that our home was not a permanent solution and that he needed to find another place. Tom became emotional and accused me of being selfish and uncaring. He said a good family member should naturally provide shelter to a relative in need. Mark seemed torn because he didn't want to upset his brother, but he also understood my perspective. Over the next month, Tom's behavior escalated. He started asking us to cover groceries, utilities, and other expenses, even though he had savings that he claimed he couldn't access right now. He also rearranged furniture in the common areas, criticized how we ran the house, and suggested we adjust our home to make it more comfortable for him. I found this invasive and disrespectful. When I confronted him, he told me I didn't care about family and that Mark should listen to his brother. He even implied that if we refused, he might stop speaking to Mark entirely. Mark and I tried to set clear boundaries. We agreed that Tom could stay temporarily, but he needed to respect our rules, contribute to the household, and actively look for another place. Tom rejected these boundaries, claiming that family always comes first and that his needs were more important than our comfort. He also contacted Mark repeatedly with guilt-laden messages, claiming he was being abandoned and that Mark was choosing me over him. Family dynamics became complicated. Some relatives agreed with us, saying it was reasonable to allow temporary assistance, but not permanent cohabitation. Others sided with Tom, arguing that family should always come first and framing our refusal as selfish. Friends who visited our home noticed the tension and advised us to maintain boundaries to prevent long-term resentment. I offered multiple practical solutions to help Tom without compromising our home. I helped him research affordable apartments, connected him with rental assistance programs, suggested temporary short-term rentals, and offered to co-sign if he could show financial responsibility. He refused every option, insisting that only living with us permanently would solve his problems. He framed our refusal as a moral failing and accused us of prioritizing our comfort over family. The situation has caused significant stress and anxiety. Mark supports my position privately, but struggles with guilt over upsetting his brother. I have reflected extensively and still feel that standing firm is necessary for my well-being and for the health of our marriage. Allowing Tom to stay permanently would likely create ongoing tension, disrupt our privacy, and negatively affect our mental health. AITA for refusing to let my husband's brother live with us permanently, even though he claims he has nowhere else to go and insists that our refusal is selfish and cruel. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation where I'd question my own morals and sanity, but here I am. I, 34F, have been married to my husband, Tom, 36M, for 8 years. We have 2 kids together, Emma, 6F, and Leo, 4M, and up until recently, I thought we had a pretty normal family life. That all changed about a month ago, and now, everything feels off balance. Tom has a younger sister, Rachel, 28F, who's always been somewhat of a free spirit. She's the kind of person who jumps from one career to another and lives in whatever city suits her mood at the time. I've always liked Rachel well enough, but she and I have never been particularly close. That's just fine with me. She's Tom's sister, and I respect our boundaries. The trouble started when Rachel asked if she could stay with us for a few weeks while she was in town for a job interview. She didn't really give a reason why she couldn't stay elsewhere, but Tom and I agreed. Our house is small, but we figured she could take Leo's old bedroom, which is currently being used as a playroom/guest room combo. I tried to make the best of it, thinking it would be temporary. At first, everything was fine. Rachel was polite, helped with the kids sometimes, and generally kept to herself. But then little things started adding up. She would leave her dirty dishes in the living room instead of the kitchen, borrow clothes without asking, and even started helping herself to my pantry in ways that made me uncomfortable. I mentioned it to her politely, and she brushed it off, saying she didn't want to feel like a guest who can't touch anything. I let it slide, try not to make a big deal out of it. Things escalated when she started offering unsolicited advice about how I raise my kids. She criticized my methods of discipline, my cooking, even the way I structure their bedtime routines. She would stand behind me while I prepared meals and make snide remarks about how easy it would be to get the kids to eat vegetables if I just did things differently. I felt my patience wearing thin, but I tried to remind myself she was just staying temporarily and that Tom would back me up if it came to confrontation. One evening, Tom and I had a small disagreement about finances, nothing major. Rachel, for some reason, decided to intervene in our argument. She sided with Tom, saying he had a point and that I was being unreasonable. I was furious, but I didn't want to start a scene in front of kids. I told her she needed to stay out of our marital discussions, and she rolled her eyes but didn't say anything. Then came the breaking point. I had been planning a small birthday party for Emma, inviting a few friends and their parents. Rachel insisted on helping plan it, and she completely took over. She made decisions about decorations, activities, and even the guest list, despite me telling her I had it under control. I tried to be patient, but the night before the party, she told me she had invited additional people she thought Emma would like more without checking with me. I lost my temper. I told her she was overstepping and that she needed to leave the planning to me. Rachel got defensive and said I was being territorial and too controlling, which was a huge blow because I was only trying to manage my child's party. She stormed off to her room, and I thought that would be the end of it. But the next morning, she did something that completely crossed the line. She took Leo, without asking, and brought him to the park, where he ended up playing with strangers. I was livid, and when I confronted her, she laughed and said, "He needed fresh air. You're too uptight about everything." Tom was stunned, but didn't immediately take sides. I insisted she needed to leave, but she refused, saying she had nowhere else to go. The situation continued to deteriorate. Rachel started subtly undermining me in front of the kids, telling them things like, "Mom doesn't like when you have fun," or "Mom is just too busy to do this right." I noticed Leo becoming clingy and anxious, and Emma started testing boundaries more aggressively, which I think was partly influenced by Rachel's comments. I tried talking to Tom multiple times, but he kept saying, "She's family, give her a chance." Then, one night, I discovered that Rachel had been looking through my personal emails on my laptop. I had left it open, and she apparently thought it was okay to check messages from my friends and even some financial statements. I confronted her immediately, and she didn't deny it. She said, "I wasn't snooping, I just wanted to see if you were planning something big for Tom's birthday. You're always hiding things." That was the final straw. I told Tom that she couldn't stay any longer, and he finally agreed she needed to leave, but not without guilt-tripping me for being harsh. When Rachel left, I thought things would return to normal, but the kids seemed different. Emma mentioned that Rachel told her that I yelled too much and that I didn't care about fun, which hurt me deeply. Leo started crying more at bedtime and asking when Aunt Rachel would come back. I'm trying to repair the dynamic, but it's been challenging. I feel torn. On one hand, I feel justified. Rachel repeatedly crossed boundaries, disrespected me, and even put my child in a potentially unsafe situation. On the other hand, Tom keeps saying I overreacted and that I should be more forgiving, which makes me doubt myself. I've always tried to be understanding, but I genuinely feel like she took advantage of my hospitality and undermined my role as a mother. So, AITA for kicking out my sister-in-law after she consistently disrespected me, overstepped boundaries with my kids, and violated my trust? I've been questioning if I was too harsh, but part of me feels that this was necessary for the safety and well-being of my children and household. I don't want a messy family feud, but I also don't want to feel powerless in my own home. The tension with Tom hasn't fully resolved either. He acknowledges that some of Rachel's actions were inappropriate, but keeps framing it as me being too strict or too sensitive. I just don't know if I handled this correctly or if I went too far. I need an outside perspective. Was I wrong to enforce boundaries so strictly and insist she leave, even considering she is family? AITA for refusing to help my sister with her wedding after years of tension between us? I, 32F, have always had a complicated relationship with my younger sister, Emily, 28F. Growing up, we were extremely close until our teenage years, when we started clashing over everything, from school achievements to friendships. Our parents were very hands-off when it came to conflict, so a lot of resentment built up, especially on her side. She always felt I was favored and made it clear, often loudly and publicly. When I moved out for college, the distance helped, and we were able to patch things up a bit, mostly through texting and occasional visits. But even as adults, we rarely see eye to eye. Emily has always had a dramatic streak. She likes being the center of attention and thrives on emotional reactions from others. I've learned to avoid the traps she sets, but it's exhausting. 2 years ago, Emily got engaged to her fiancé, Jason, 30M. I met him a few times and found him kind and decent, but he is clearly swept up in Emily's whirlwind personality. Initially, I was excited for her, but as the wedding planning progressed, things started to get stressful. Emily has a massive extended family and an extensive circle of friends, many of whom she is very close with. She decided early on that she wanted me to be heavily involved in the planning process. Specifically, she asked me to help with the seating arrangements, flower choices, invitations, and to oversee various other details. The problem is that I have a full-time job in a high-demand field and several personal projects I am committed to. I offer to help with 1 or 2 small things, like reviewing the invitations or giving input on decorations, but she took that as me being unhelpful and disinterested in her happiness. Over time, the requests escalated. She asked me to go on a weekend shopping trip for the wedding dress and accessories, to coordinate with multiple vendors, and to manage RSVPs for nearly 150 guests. She would message me at all hours, demanding answers and criticizing my ideas, often in a way that made me feel belittled. Whenever I tried to set boundaries or say no, she would guilt-trip me, accusing me of being selfish and not caring about family. A month ago, she sent a long text message listing everything she expected me to do in the 2 months leading up to the wedding. It included multiple weekend commitments and tasks that would require me to take time off work, rearrange my personal life, and essentially put her wedding above all else. I responded that I could help in smaller ways, but couldn't commit to the full list. That started a huge argument. She accused me of being lazy, unsupportive, and trying to ruin her wedding. Jason got involved and suggested I step up for my sister, which made me feel cornered. At that point, I decided to step back completely. I told Emily that I loved her and was happy for her, but I would not be handling any wedding tasks. I offered to attend the wedding and help in minor, non-stressful ways, like giving a toast or helping set up decorations the day before. She did not respond well. She unfollowed me on social media, didn't respond to my messages, and started telling other family members that I was being difficult. Since then, there has been a lot of family drama. My parents are upset with me, saying that I should support my sister no matter what, and that I am letting petty grudges ruin family unity. Several aunts and uncles have asked why I am not helping, and Emily has openly criticized me at family gatherings. Even some friends of mine have suggested I just compromise to avoid being labeled the villain. I feel caught between two conflicting feelings. On one hand, I want to support my sister in ways that don't jeopardize my own mental health or responsibilities. On the other hand, I feel like I am being punished for setting reasonable boundaries. My concern is that if I do everything she wants, I will be drained and resentful, and are already fragile. Relationship could break down completely. I have tried to communicate calmly, explaining that my support does not have to mean taking on all her work or being available 24/7. I've suggested hiring a professional wedding planner to handle the logistics or delegating tasks to other family members who want to help. Emily refuses to consider this, insisting that I am the only one who understands her vision and that no one else can do it correctly. Now, my parents are pressuring me to make things right, and Emily refuses to speak to me except for passive-aggressive texts. I have considered attending only the wedding ceremony without participating in the events leading up to it, but I worry that even that might be seen as me being dismissive or cold. Some friends have told me I should just go along to avoid family conflict, but others say that I have a right to set limits, especially since I've been dealing with this kind of manipulation for years. I am starting to feel guilty, despite knowing that I'm standing up for myself. I wonder if I'm overreacting and being selfish, or if it is reasonable to protect my own mental health and personal boundaries. I also worry about the long-term consequences for my relationship with Emily. If I stick to my boundaries, will we ever repair our relationship, or am I permanently labeled as the unhelpful sister? I am reaching out here because I want an honest perspective. Am I the asshole for refusing to take on extensive wedding responsibilities and prioritizing my own limits, even if it disappoints my sister? Or should I push through and participate fully to preserve family peace, even if it comes at a personal cost? Any input would be appreciated. AITA for refusing to let my childhood friend move in with me indefinitely, even though she says she has nowhere else to go. I, 33F, live in a 2-bedroom apartment in a medium-sized city. I've lived here for about 6 years, and I like to think of it as my personal sanctuary. I have one roommate, my cat, and generally keep a structured life with work, hobbies, and some social activities. My childhood friend, Sophie, 32F, reached out to me a few months ago after a series of unfortunate events. She lost her job at a local retail store due to cutbacks, got evicted from her apartment for non-payment, and her car broke down. She called me in tears, saying she had nowhere else to go and asked if she could move in temporarily. I agreed to let her stay for a couple of weeks, thinking it would give her a short window to get back on her feet. She was clearly stressed, and I wanted to support her. I expected that she would start applying to jobs, look for a new apartment, and generally treat the stay as temporary. At first, things went smoothly. She kept her things in her designated area, helped with some chores, and seemed genuinely appreciative. I thought the arrangement would be fine, and I enjoyed catching up with her after years apart. After the first week, Sophie's attitude began to shift. She started leaving dishes in the sink for several days, piling laundry in shared spaces, and inviting friends over without asking. When I reminded her of the house rules, she became defensive, saying that she needed space because she was dealing with so much stress. I tried to be understanding, but I also reminded her that my apartment is my home and that we needed to respect boundaries. 2 weeks in, Sophie told me she might need to stay longer because finding a new apartment was taking longer than expected. I explained that my place was not meant to be a long-term solution, and she would need to explore other options soon. She became upset, accusing me of being selfish and unsupportive. She insisted that I should naturally allow her to stay because we've been friends for decades and I have a stable job while she doesn't. Over the next month, her demands increased. She began asking me to cover groceries, utilities, and other expenses, claiming she couldn't afford anything without a job. I reminded her that my initial offer was temporary and that indefinite financial support was not something I could provide. She argued that I could afford it and that a true friend would help, framing my refusal as a moral failure. Sophie also started taking over parts of the apartment. She rearranged furniture in the living room, commented on how I managed the space, and suggested changes to accommodate her more comfortably. I told her I wasn't comfortable with this and reminded her that she was a guest, but she accused me of being controlling and unsympathetic. She even threatened that if I didn't let her stay indefinitely, she would stop speaking to me. I tried to offer practical solutions. I helped her search for affordable apartments, connected her with local rental assistance programs, suggested temporary short-term rentals, and even offered to co-sign for a place if she could demonstrate financial responsibility. She rejected all of these options, insisting that only living with me rent-free would solve her problems. The situation created tension not only between us, but also among mutual friends. Sophie began sharing her side of the story with our social circle, framing me as cold and unsupportive. Some friends agreed with her, saying that helping a friend in crisis is a moral obligation, while others agreed with me, pointing out that temporary support is reasonable, but indefinite residency is unfair. As time went on, her behavior became more disruptive. She started staying out late, bringing strangers into the apartment, leaving messes, and making snide comments about how I was lucky to have such a stable life. I felt like my home was no longer my own. I attempted multiple calm discussions, explaining that I wanted to help within limits, but that indefinite cohabitation without contribution was not acceptable. Despite my repeated attempts to set boundaries, Sophie refused to comply. She demanded that I let her stay permanently and claimed that I was prioritizing comfort over friendship. I began feeling anxious, stressed, and exhausted. My mental health started suffering because I could not relax in my own home. Even though I tried to help her in practical ways, she refused anything that required personal responsibility or effort on her part. I feel guilty because she's upset and because some friends and acquaintances think I should have done more. However, I also feel justified because allowing her to stay indefinitely would have seriously disrupted my life and would likely lead to long-term resentment. I wanted to support her and preserve our friendship, but I also need to maintain my home, finances, and mental well-being. AITA for refusing to let my childhood friend live in my apartment indefinitely, even though she claims she has nowhere else to go and insists my refusal is selfish and cruel. AITA for refusing to let my sister live with me after she lost her job and her house. I, 32F, have always been independent and financially stable. I own a small townhouse in a mid-sized city and work as a software engineer. I live alone, which I love because I enjoy my routines, quiet time, and having control over my space. My sister, Mia, 29F, has always been a bit more chaotic in her life choices. She's had a string of short-term jobs, most of which ended poorly either due to her quitting abruptly or being let go. Over the past few years, she has rented different apartments, often moving at the last minute because she couldn't keep up with rent or had conflicts with roommates. About a month ago, Mia called me in tears. She had been evicted from her apartment after missing rent for 3 months. Her current job, which she loved, was eliminating her position, and she had no savings to fall back on. She begged me to let her stay with me temporarily until she got back on her feet. At first, I hesitated, but I told her I would consider it and asked her to give me a week to think. During that week, I weighed several factors. My townhouse is small. It's 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, and it's arranged so that the rooms are connected by a narrow hallway. There's really only one proper private bedroom. I will be giving up my guest room for her, which isn't a big deal, but the thought of having someone live here long-term, especially someone with a history of unstable living, stressed me out. I also thought about my own routines and mental health. I love having control over my space and my schedule. Sharing it with someone who's chaotic could create tension. I also considered that Mia doesn't drive, and public transit near my area isn't great, so I might end up being responsible for helping her with commutes and errands, which would impact my work and free time. When I finally spoke to her, I told her the truth. I said I was concerned about how our lifestyles would clash and that I was worried about setting a precedent for her relying on me. I emphasized that I wanted her to succeed on her own, but that I couldn't offer her a living arrangement in my home. I also offered to help her look for short-term rentals, provided advice on applying for assistance programs, and offered to lend her a small amount of money for first month's rent or deposit if she found a place quickly. I thought this was a fair compromise. Mia reacted very badly. She said I was heartless and accused me of always prioritizing my own comfort over family. She said that I was refusing to help her because I was afraid she would mess up my life and called me selfish. She even suggested that I didn't love her if I refused to let her stay in my home. I tried to explain that this was about maintaining boundaries and ensuring that both of us could stay healthy mentally and emotionally, but she was unconvinced. After our conversation, I noticed that our extended family started taking her side. My parents said that I should be a good sister and that I was being cruel. My aunt sent me a long message about how family is supposed to support each other unconditionally and that I had a moral obligation to let her stay with me. Some cousins even commented on social media, questioning why I wouldn't help my sister in a time of crisis. This has left me feeling extremely conflicted. On one hand, I hate feeling like the bad sibling, and I don't want to hurt my sister. On the other, I feel that living together would create a tense, potentially hostile environment, and I'm worried about enabling a pattern of dependency that could harm her more in the long run. Since then, Mia has been staying in a series of short-term Airbnb rentals and friends' couches. She checks in with me regularly, often venting about how hard it is to be without a permanent home. I try to support her emotionally, but she keeps bringing up the idea of moving in with me again. Every time, I reaffirm my boundaries, but the tension is escalating. Some family members have started sending me articles about how siblings should support each other no matter what. And my parents even suggested I might owe her something for being the more responsible sibling. I have tried to explain my perspective multiple times, that helping doesn't always have to mean cohabitating, that I can support her in other ways, and that I fear long-term consequences for both of us if we live together. I've offered financial assistance and help finding resources, but it seems like nothing satisfies her or the family. I also worry that giving in now would not only disrupt my life, but also make it harder to enforce boundaries in the future. Some friends have told me I'm right to prioritize my mental health and independence, while others say that family should come first. I genuinely want to help Mia, but I also feel that moving in together would be a disaster waiting to happen. I'm starting to wonder if I'm being unreasonable or if my family is putting unfair pressure on me. So, Reddit AITA for refusing to let my sister live with me after she lost her job and her home. I feel like I'm trying to help in ways that don't compromise my life, but my family sees it as cold or selfish, and I'm struggling with the guilt. AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's wedding after she demanded I contribute more than I'm comfortable with. I, 31F, have a younger sister, Emily, 28F, who is getting married later this year. She and her fiancé decided to have a fairly large wedding, around 150 guests, at a venue in our hometown. From the start, she made it clear that she expected both of our parents and me to contribute financially. My parents were fine with this, since they have more disposable income, but she also assumed I would contribute a significant amount. Initially, I thought this meant a small portion, like helping cover a minor cost or a part of the decorations, but she started giving me specific numbers that were way beyond what I had budgeted or could afford without going into debt. Emily approached me about 6 months ago and said she wanted me to pay for roughly a third of the total wedding cost. I was shocked because that would be nearly $12,000. I make a decent salary, but I also have student loans, rent, and savings for a future house. I explained to her that this was not something I could realistically cover. She became defensive and said that since I don't have kids, my financial obligations are minimal compared to hers, so I should be able to manage it easily. I tried to reason with her, pointing out that having disposable income doesn't mean I can drop that much money without major consequences. She accused me of being selfish and unsupportive of her biggest day. Over the next few weeks, she kept bringing it up, sometimes texting me multiple times a day about what I would pay. She started itemizing expenses and sending me invoices for things like flowers, catering, and even some of her dress costs. I told her I was willing to help in other ways, assisting with planning, DIY decorations, and organizing smaller parts of the event, but I couldn't contribute financially in the amount she expected. She said my help wasn't enough and that I was basically trying to avoid my responsibility as her sister. Things got worse when she involved my parents. She told them I was refusing to support her wedding financially and made it seem like I was being unreasonable. My parents tried to mediate and asked me to compromise, suggesting I pay a smaller portion. I told them I could maybe cover a few $100s for specific things like some flowers or small decor items, but anything beyond that would put me in serious financial strain. My parents said that while they understood my concern, I needed to find a way to contribute more to avoid upsetting Emily. Emily's fiancé also weighed in at one point, saying that family should support weddings and that I was making things unnecessarily difficult. It made me feel like everyone was ganging up on me. I reiterated that I wanted to support her in non-financial ways, but she dismissed that and said it doesn't count. At this point, I started feeling really stressed. I was constantly getting messages from Emily, my parents, and even friends of the family asking why I hadn't paid yet. She sent me a list of everything she expected me to cover, which included some very expensive items I hadn't anticipated. I told her that I couldn't commit to those costs and offered a compromise of helping with smaller, specific things that fit my budget. She refused and said that unless I paid my fair share, I wasn't really part of the wedding. The situation escalated when she started hinting that if I didn't pay, she wouldn't invite me to be part of the bridal party or have a speaking role during the ceremony. That hurt because I've always been close to her and I wanted to be supportive, but it felt manipulative. I tried to explain that my love and support aren't measured by how much money I can provide, but she said it's traditional for siblings to contribute financially and that I was breaking tradition. I even suggested alternative ways to help financially without giving cash, like hosting a small pre-wedding party, organizing a charity donation in her honor, or even crafting some handmade items to offset costs. But she dismissed all of these ideas as insufficient. She insisted that only cash in the amounts she specified would be acceptable. After multiple arguments, I stood my ground. I told her clearly that I would not give more than I could afford, and that my relationship with her shouldn't be conditional on money. She has since been giving me the silent treatment and posting on social media about how difficult it is when family refuses to support your wedding. My parents are upset, and some family members have started subtly blaming me for the stress. I genuinely want my sister to have a wonderful wedding, but I also don't want to put myself in debt or compromise my financial stability. I feel guilty because it's her special day and she's upset with me, but I also feel like I'm being reasonable. My other friends who are married have said that it's not uncommon for family members to contribute in non-financial ways and that setting boundaries is important, but others say I should just pay up to avoid family drama. So, AITA for refusing to contribute more money than I can afford to my sister's wedding, even though she and some family members think I should. AITA for refusing to let my brother's new wife live with me, even though she's family now. I, 34F, have a long history with my brother, 36M, and until recently, we were incredibly close. We grew up sharing a lot, and even in adulthood, we maintained a strong sibling bond. That all changed when he got married 2 years ago to his now wife, Clara, 32F. I'll call her Clara for the sake of this story. Before I go further, I want to give some context about our living situation. I live in a 3-bedroom apartment by myself. It's in a good neighborhood, it's mine, and it's my sanctuary. I've lived here for 6 years, and I've always been very independent. I don't have kids, but I have a busy career that keeps me busy in a tight social circle. My brother, on the other hand, has always been a bit more impulsive and dependent. When my brother got married, he and Clara asked me if she could stay over for a short visit until she found her own apartment. This seemed harmless at first. I agreed because, honestly, it was just a couple of nights. However, those couple of nights stretched into 2 months. Clara didn't seem to be actively looking for an apartment, and she got very comfortable in my space. She rearranged some of my furniture to make it feel like home and started leaving her belongings in my apartment permanently. I tried to be polite about it, thinking maybe she was stressed with the move, but eventually I had to draw a line. I told my brother that she needed to find her own place, that I couldn't have her living with me indefinitely. He agreed initially and promised to have her out by the end of the month. But soon after, I noticed she was still spending almost every night at my place. I tried to set boundaries, like limiting her visits to weekends and asking her to keep her belongings in her own home. She ignored all of it, and my brother started making excuses for her. Things escalated when I came home one evening and found Clara had borrowed some of my clothes without asking. She left them in a pile in the guest bedroom, which she had now claimed as her own space. I was furious. I confronted her about it, and she got defensive, saying she was family now and should feel comfortable. I told her that being family didn't mean she could take over my home. My brother intervened and told me I was being too harsh and shouldn't make her feel unwelcome. The next week, Clara invited her friends over to my apartment while I was at work. I came home to a full living room of people I didn't know, and there was food, drinks, and even some decorations for a girls' night she had planned. I lost it. I told her she could not have people over without asking, and that she needed to respect my home. She started crying and said I was being selfish and cruel. My brother called me later that night and accused me of trying to turn family against her. After that, I stopped answering calls for a few days. When I finally spoke to my brother, he told me that Clara had threatened to leave him if she couldn't live with me. He said she felt attacked and that it was unfair for me to refuse her. I explained calmly that I loved my brother, but I couldn't have someone living in my home who ignored my rules and disrespected my boundaries. He said I was choosing my apartment over our family and that I was letting a guest ruin the relationship. I did offer a compromise. I would help Clara look for apartments, give her temporary accommodations like hotels, and even help with moving expenses. I even suggested she could stay in my parents' house for a short while if needed. But my brother refused to consider these options, saying that the idea of her not living with me was inhumane and emotionally abusive. It's now been 3 months since she moved in temporarily, and she is fully settled in my apartment. She has decorated her room, treats my home as her own, and continues to invite people over without asking. I have tried to enforce boundaries, but my brother continually undermines me. Our relationship has become tense, and I feel constantly stressed in my own home. I finally told him he needed to choose. Either Clara find her own place, or I will stop interacting with both of them. He reacted with anger, saying I was being unreasonable and that I needed to learn to be a good sister and family member. I have friends who say I'm completely justified and that my home is my sanctuary. Others say I'm being selfish and should put family first, especially since my brother and Clara are newly married and could use support. I love my brother dearly, but I feel that he is prioritizing his wife over my personal boundaries and that Clara is taking advantage of my generosity. I'm at the point where I don't know if I'm being unreasonable. I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, but I also don't want to ruin my relationship with my brother forever. I've considered offering to help Clara more aggressively find a place, but I also worry that if I do that, it will signal that I am okay with her behavior continuing. So, Reddit AITA for refusing to let my brother's wife live in my apartment, even though she considers herself family now. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay in my house during the week, even though it's just for a few days. So, this has been a tense situation in my family for months, and I really need some outside perspective because I feel like I'm being painted as the villain here. I, 28F, live in a small but cozy apartment in a city where space is at a premium. I moved here right after college and have worked hard to make it my own, saving money and creating a routine that works for me. I don't have roommates, and I value my privacy highly. My sister, Emily, 26F, lives about 2 hours away in a neighboring city and recently got engaged. She's been planning her wedding and has a fiancé, Tom, 30M, who she's been with for about a year. Tom is a nice guy on the surface, but he's also incredibly needy and, in my experience, kind of entitled. They've been in the final stages of wedding planning, and Emily asked me last month if Tom could stay at my apartment during the week while he's in town for work. She phrased it as a really short-term thing, just a couple of nights. Now, here's the thing. Tom works in my city a few days a week, but he also has a hotel budget through his company. I thought it was a bit odd that he wanted to crash in my apartment when he could just book a room for a few nights, but I try to keep an open mind. I explained to Emily that my apartment is small and that I don't have the space for guests comfortably. I also mentioned that my work schedule is intense and I use my apartment for remote work sometimes. Emily said she understood, but then followed up a week later, saying that Tom's hotel reservations fell through due to some glitch with his corporate account. She added that it would only be for a week, max, and that they really didn't have anywhere else to go in the city. I hesitated, but I still tried to be reasonable. I suggested maybe one night, or that I could help him find a cheap Airbnb or a friend's place, but Emily kept insisting, framing it as a family favor. She even said, "It's family. You'll help, right?" I know she meant well, but this phrasing made it feel less like a request and more like a demand. I ended up saying no, firmly but politely, explaining again that I don't have the space and that it would disrupt my work and personal life. I also added that I'm not comfortable having someone stay in my home for multiple nights, even if they are family. Emily got really upset. She said I was being selfish and that family should support each other. She told me that everyone else in the family would think I was overreacting and that I was making Tom feel unwelcome. She also brought up past instances where I had stayed at her place during holidays or weekends, which is true, but I feel like staying at her apartment for a weekend is very different from hosting someone for an entire week. I don't think she gets that. Things escalated when she started sending me texts almost daily, asking if I'd reconsider. She even tried guilting me by pointing out that Tom was so stressed with wedding planning and work, and that I would be doing a good deed by letting him stay. At one point, she said that if I refused, it would be really disappointing and hurtful, which I felt was manipulative. I tried to explain that helping Tom find a place or even offering to host him for one night would be a compromise, but she wouldn't accept it. She also implied that I was being unkind and not supportive of her engagement, which made me feel like no matter what I did, it wouldn't be enough. I spoke to my parents about it, hoping they'd mediate, but they ended up taking Emily's side. They said I should be more accommodating and that it's just a few days. I try to explain that my space is limited and that it's not about being unwilling to help, but about boundaries. They told me I was making a big deal out of nothing and that family should put up with a little inconvenience. I even offered to let Tom stay at a friend's apartment temporarily, or I could help pay for a hotel night, but apparently that wasn't enough either. My parents kept reminding me of the hospitality we expect in the family, which made me feel pressured but didn't change my position. Eventually, Emily's fiancé made a comment directly to me when we saw each other at a family dinner. He said, "I guess I'll just have to rough it in a hotel like everyone else," with a half smile that clearly indicated he knew he was being a slight inconvenience. I tried to brush it off, but it felt passive-aggressive. Emily glared at me and whispered later that I could be nicer and make an effort for family. I felt trapped because any response I gave seemed to escalate the tension. Since then, our communication has been strained. Emily has been giving me the cold shoulder, and she keeps posting on social media about family support and helping loved ones, which feels like it's aimed at me. Tom has been staying in a hotel for the week, and apparently he's been sharing with Emily how inconvenient it is to be on his own in the city, which she relays to me with a tone that implies it's my fault. My friends all say I'm right to set boundaries, but I can't shake the feeling that I might actually be overreacting. My apartment is small, but it's not like it's impossible for someone to stay. On the other hand, I've never had anyone stay that long without it being a planned visit, and it really would disrupt my schedule. Now, I'm being told that I'm the one causing family drama and that I need to grow up and learn to share my space. I understand the principle, but I also feel like I've compromised enough already by helping find alternative arrangements and offering to host for one night. The stress of constantly defending my decision has been exhausting, and I'm worried that Emily and Tom will continue to hold a grudge. I want to maintain my independence and comfort in my home, and I feel like saying no should be acceptable without being labeled as the bad sister. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay in my apartment for the week, even though it would technically be a small favor to the family. My main concern is maintaining my personal space and routine, and I feel like I've tried to compromise without giving in completely, but the family keeps framing it as me being selfish. What do you think? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to attend my cousin's wedding after she publicly embarrassed me in front of our entire family. I, 34F, have always been close with my extended family, especially my cousin Samantha, 32F. Growing up, we were inseparable during family gatherings, holidays, and birthdays. We shared everything, from school struggles to relationship advice, and I thought our bond was unshakable. That changed dramatically during last year's family reunion. Samantha had been dating Mark, 35M, for several years, and they got engaged last summer. Their engagement announcement was exciting, and I was genuinely happy for them. I also started helping her plan certain aspects of the wedding because she seemed stressed, and I wanted to support her. I have always been someone who enjoys organizing events, and I thought I could contribute meaningfully. Fast forward to the reunion. The entire family was gathered at my aunt's house. I had flown in a day early to help set up, arrange decorations, and coordinate the meal plan. Everything was going smoothly until dinner. During the main course, Samantha unexpectedly started criticizing me loudly in front of everyone. She made remarks about my personal choices, my job, and even my relationship status, framing them as jokes. For example, she said, "Can you believe she's still single at 34? I guess some of us just can't find the right person," and laughed while looking around for approval. I felt my face turn red, and many family members chuckled awkwardly. I tried to brush it off, hoping it was harmless teasing, but then she escalated. After dessert, she gathered everyone to take a group photo. In the middle of posing, she loudly asked, "Are you still eating like that? At your age, shouldn't you be watching your diet?" She made exaggerated gestures and laughed in a way that clearly invited everyone to mock me. I was mortified. I couldn't believe she was doing this in front of my parents, my aunts and uncles, and our cousins. My attempts to excuse myself were met with Samantha saying, "Come on, it's just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." The rest of the evening was tense. I spent most of it in another room, tried to avoid being targeted by more comments. Samantha kept making side remarks when I rejoined the group, subtly undermining me, criticizing my contributions to the reunion setup, and comparing me to other family members in ways that highlighted supposed flaws. Even my younger cousins, who normally look up to me, seemed confused and uncomfortable. After the reunion, I confronted Samantha privately. I told her that her behavior was humiliating and unacceptable, especially in front of family. She shrugged and said it was all in good fun. Everyone was laughing. You just need to lighten up. I was stunned. To me, it wasn't fun. It was cruel and public humiliation. I told her I couldn't forgive her for this so easily, and that it had changed how I felt about our relationship. Since then, Samantha has been trying to convince me to attend her wedding. She sent me multiple messages, calling me overly dramatic and saying that I'm making a big deal out of nothing. She even suggested that if I don't attend, I would be jeopardizing our family bond. My parents, who were present during the reunion, have told me I should just let it go for the sake of family peace, and that weddings are supposed to bring people together, not divide them. I feel torn. On one hand, I value family deeply, and I don't want to miss such a milestone event. On the other hand, I don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm likely to be mocked or belittled again. The thought of sitting through the ceremony and reception, knowing that Samantha might make jokes at my expense or invite others to do the same, makes me extremely anxious. I've spent weeks imagining scenarios, and I can't shake the memory of how embarrassed and powerless I felt during the reunion. I've spoken to a few close friends outside the family. Some say that attending could demonstrate maturity and show that I'm willing to forgive, while others argue that my feelings are valid and that it's reasonable to set boundaries, even if it means missing the wedding. I've considered attending for just the ceremony or arriving late to avoid interaction, but part of me feels that any attendance would be perceived as condoning her behavior. I've tried to make peace with the idea of not attending, but I keep getting pressure from multiple angles. Samantha's fiancé, Mark, has also reached out, asking me to reconsider, saying that Samantha doesn't mean anything by it and that she really values my presence. I feel that any reconciliation would require acknowledgement and apology, but Samantha refuses to admit wrongdoing. So, AITA for refusing to attend my cousin's wedding after she publicly humiliated me at our family reunion. I'm struggling with balancing my desire to maintain family relationships with my need to protect myself from further embarrassment and disrespect. I want to stand my ground, but I also fear being labeled as the family drama maker or the one who is holding a grudge. I don't want to burn bridges completely, but I also can't force myself into a situation that could cause emotional harm. I need to know if setting this boundary makes me unreasonable or if it's acceptable to prioritize my dignity over a social expectation. I don't want to cut ties with Samantha forever, but I also can't ignore what happened. I'm caught between preserving family unity and protecting my mental well-being, and I don't know what the right decision is. Has anyone else faced a situation where attending a loved one's wedding felt emotionally unsafe? How did you navigate it? AITA for refusing to buy my boyfriend a luxury car, even though he says it's a joint decision. I, 29F, have been dating my boyfriend, Mark, 32M, for 4 years. We live together in a 2-bedroom apartment, split expenses, and share a joint account for household bills, groceries, and rent. Financially, we are pretty stable. We both earn decent salaries and have been saving for future house. Recently, Mark brought up the idea of buying a new car. Specifically, he wants a brand new luxury SUV that costs around $85,000. I was immediately taken aback because our current car, which we purchased 3 years ago, is paid off, reliable, and in great condition. Mark started talking about it months ago, dropping hints about how much he deserves a new car and how it would be nice for both of us to upgrade. At first, I didn't take it seriously, but became more persistent. He said he wants to use part of our joint savings to make a down payment and suggested financing the rest. I told him that I wasn't comfortable using that much money for a car we don't need, especially one with such a high price tag. He argued that it's not just his car, it's ours, and that since we share finances and future plans, I should be involved in the decision and support it. I tried to explain my point of view. I said our current car works perfectly, has low mileage, and there's no practical need for a luxury SUV. I pointed out that $85,000 could go toward a down payment on a house, emergency savings, or even investing. I reminded him that we have been saving for years to eventually buy property, and a car that depreciates quickly would feel like a waste of our hard-earned money. He said I was being short-sighted and controlling, and that he just wants something that makes life more enjoyable for both of us. We argued several times, and each time he brought up the joint decision argument. He says that since we combine income and expenses, any significant purchase should be agreed on by both of us. I agreed with that in principle, but I don't think that means we are obligated to buy something unnecessary and expensive just because he wants it. I suggested alternatives, like a more modest car that would still be comfortable and reliable, or waiting a few years until we can comfortably afford it without affecting other goals. He dismissed these suggestions, claiming that a compromise isn't exciting and that I was killing his dreams. The conflict escalated when he started comparing our situation to other couples we know. He mentioned friends who recently bought new luxury cars together and how happy they are. He also said that because we both contribute equally to our finances, refusing him makes me selfish and unsupportive. I told him that supporting him doesn't have to mean spending tens of thousands on a depreciating vehicle. I offered to handle other things like weekend trips, small gifts, and helping him with budgeting for other personal purchases, but he said none of that matters if I won't agree to the car. Mark has started bringing up the issue daily, and it's affecting our relationship. He's been distant and passive-aggressive, saying things like, "I guess your savings are more important than my happiness," and "I shouldn't have to ask permission to enjoy my life." I feel trapped because I want to maintain fairness in our relationship and preserve our joint finances, but I also feel guilty that he's unhappy. I don't want to give in, but the constant pressure is stressful. Some friends and family have weighed in, and the opinions are divided. Some say that if the money is joint, I should compromise for his happiness, especially if he's contributing equally to the purchase. Others say I'm being responsible and setting healthy boundaries. They point out that Mark is framing this as a joint decision to guilt me into paying for something extravagant that neither of us practically needs. I tend to agree with the latter, but I can't help feeling guilty because he genuinely seems excited about it, and I don't want to appear controlling or stingy. I've considered compromising by offering a smaller contribution or suggesting that he finance the car entirely on his own income. But he insists that using our joint savings makes sense because it's our car. I also worry about precedent. If I agree to this purchase, it could make it harder to say no to other expensive or unnecessary things in the future. On the other hand, if I refuse, it could create resentment and ongoing tension between us. We've had several heated discussions, and both of us are frustrated. I've tried to emphasize that I'm not against him enjoying things or making large purchases within reason, but I want to be responsible about money that affects both of us. He interprets my stance as controlling and unsupportive, while I see his insistence as reckless and dismissive of financial priorities. So, AITA for refusing to buy a luxury car with my boyfriend, even though he insists it's a joint decision because we share finances and future plans? AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay in my house after what happened last summer. So, this is a long one, and I really hope I can make it clear because it's been bothering me for months. I, 28F, live in a medium-sized city in a modest apartment I bought a couple of years ago. I work full-time as a graphic designer, and I take pride in keeping my place organized, quiet, and calm. My younger sister, Emily, 25F, is getting married next month, and her fiancé, Mark, 27M, has been in the picture for about 2 years. At first, I liked Mark. He seemed polite, funny, and genuinely affectionate toward Emily. However, last summer something happened that completely changed my perspective. Emily and Mark have been planning a long weekend trip to the coast, and Mark mentioned that he wanted to visit a nearby city beforehand to see some friends. Emily's place was too small for them to host everyone, and she jokingly asked if they could crash at my apartment for one night before heading to their rental. I was hesitant because I value my privacy and don't like having people stay over unexpectedly, but Emily insisted, saying it would just be one night and they'd be gone early. I relented, thinking it would be fine. From the moment they arrived, things went downhill. First, Mark tracked mud all over my clean floors, even though I explicitly told him to wipe his shoes. Then he made a mess in my kitchen, leaving used dishes in the sink and crumbs on the counter, despite me offering him clean plates and a towel to clean up. I let it slide because it was only one night, but the warning bells were already ringing. That evening, they decided to watch a movie in my living room. Mark insisted on ordering pizza for delivery, which I didn't mind, except he somehow forgot to mention he had food allergies and ordered a pizza with mushrooms and dairy that triggered his allergy. When it became clear he couldn't eat it, he loudly complained and demanded I make him something else. I have a full-time job, and I don't like cooking multiple meals for people I don't live with, especially on work night. I told him I wasn't going to cook for him, and Emily tried to mediate, but he ended up storming into my kitchen, grabbed some ingredients, and made a mess while trying to cook for himself. Flour on my countertops, sauce on my cabinets, and bits of burnt food everywhere. I wanted to lose my mind, but I told myself to stay calm and went to my room. It didn't end there. Later, Mark decided he wanted to play video games on my console. He didn't ask, just sat down and started playing. When I told him he should ask first, he snapped, saying I was being ridiculous and that it was my fault for buying such an inconvenient apartment if I didn't want guests. I was stunned. At that point, Emily finally said we should just go out for a walk and leave me alone. When they left the next morning, I found that my bathroom had been used as some kind of storage for Mark's things, and my trash bin had been left overflowing with his wrappers and papers. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning and reorganizing before I could even start my workday. After this incident, I told Emily I couldn't host Mark again. I said it wasn't personal against her, but after the chaos of last summer, I didn't feel comfortable letting him in my space. Emily got really upset. She said I was being overly dramatic and holding a grudge over a small thing. She reminded me that Mark was now her fiancé and that I should be willing to accommodate him at least occasionally. I I reminded her that it wasn't just one small thing. It was multiple issues that showed a lack of respect for my home and boundaries. I even explained that I love her and want to have a good relationship with Mark, but that doesn't mean I have to compromise my personal space, especially when he has demonstrated a total disregard for it. She got quiet and then started crying, saying I was choosing my apartment over her happiness and that I was being selfish. She hasn't really spoken to me properly since that day, although she still talks to me occasionally in short texts. Recently, she sent me a message asking if Mark could stay for one night again during a weekend when she and he were visiting the city. She even said she would make sure Mark behaves this time, but I still feel uneasy. I politely declined, saying my answer hasn't changed and I'm not willing to host him. Emily replied, asking why I couldn't just forgive and forget, and that Mark is different now. I tried explaining calmly that it's not about holding grudges, but about not feeling comfortable in my own home, but she hasn't responded after that. Some mutual friends have started asking me if I'm seriously going to keep Mark out of my house forever, and if I'm being unreasonable. They point out that it was just one night last year, and maybe I'm overreacting. I understand their point of view, but I also feel that my apartment is my sanctuary, and I shouldn't be forced to host someone who has already shown a lack of respect for it. I've considered offering to meet them at a cafe or a restaurant instead, but Emily seems to think that's not enough. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay at my place again, even if it causes tension before the wedding. I feel like I'm trying to protect my boundaries, but I also don't want to be seen as the bad sister in the family. I'm worried that this might permanently strain my relationship with Emily, and I don't know how to navigate it without compromising my own comfort. Has anyone else dealt with a situation like this, where a guest's behavior was so disrespectful that it made you set strict boundaries, but your family thinks you're overreacting? I'm trying to be reasonable, but I also don't want to feel like my home isn't safe. What's the line between being accommodating and being taken advantage of? I feel trapped because I want to support my sister and her fiancé, but not at the expense of my own peace. Any advice or judgment would be appreciated. AITA for refusing to let my younger sister move back in after she got out of rehab. I, 32F, have always been the responsible one in my family. I grew up in a chaotic household where my parents often fought, and my younger sister, Emily, 28F, was allowed to do pretty much whatever she wanted. I've tried to support her over the years, but it's always been a roller coaster. She has struggled with addiction for most of her adult life, and while she's had periods of sobriety, they've usually been short-lived. About a month ago, Emily completed a 90-day rehab program. She called me immediately after leaving, excited and hopeful. She explained that she had a sponsor now, a solid plan, and that she really wanted to make amends with our family. I was cautiously optimistic. I know she's capable of change, and I wanted to be supportive without setting myself up for heartbreak. She asked if she could move back in with me while she got on her feet. I hesitated. My house isn't huge, and I live with my partner, Daniel, 35M. We rent a 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. I told her I needed to think about it, because it's a big step. I'm a firm believer in second chances, but I also know how volatile her addiction has been in the past. I spoke with Daniel about it. He was more hesitant than I was. He has seen Emily in her worst moments when she would steal from us, crash on our couch for weeks, and sometimes put herself in danger. Daniel told me he didn't want that kind of stress in our home. I agreed with him in principle, but didn't want to shut Emily down completely. I decided to set up some boundaries if she were to stay with us. She would need to follow a strict schedule, attend meetings, and contribute financially and with chores. I was also very clear that this would be a temporary arrangement with regular check-ins. Emily seemed to accept this and said she understood. When she arrived, things were tense but manageable. She had a lot of energy about her recovery and was eager to prove herself. I tried to be supportive without being overbearing. But within the first week, small issues began to crop up. She would occasionally leave her rehab homework incomplete, skip a meeting, or disappear for hours without telling me. I reminded her gently a couple of times, but she would always apologize and promise to do better. Then came the night that broke the patience I thought I had. Emily got a text from one of her old friends, someone I know she had used with in the past. She insisted on meeting them to talk things out. I told her I wasn't comfortable with it, given her recent recovery, and suggested maybe waiting a few weeks. She got defensive, accusing me of not trusting her and treating her like a child. I reminded her that trust needs to be earned, especially after rehab. She left anyway. She came back late at night, visibly agitated, and smelled faintly of alcohol. She claimed she hadn't had a drink, but was clearly lying. I tried to confront her calmly, asking her to be honest. She snapped, yelled, and slammed her bedroom door. Daniel and I were left sitting in the living room, unsure how to proceed. The next day, I had a long talk with her about the boundaries and the consequences of violating them. I told her she needed to leave if she wasn't going to follow the rules. She cried and accused me of being unsupportive, claiming I was punishing her for trying to get better. I spent the night thinking about it. I want to help her, I really do, but I also cannot risk my mental health or my relationship with Daniel. I've seen her fall before, and I know that enabling her, even unintentionally, could set her back instead of helping her move forward. The next morning, I gently but firmly told her she needed to find another place to stay. I offered to help her find temporary housing or a sober living environment, but my apartment was no longer an option. She reacted extremely badly. She accused me of hating her, of never having cared about her, and of siding with Daniel over her. She posted a long, emotional rant on social media about how I abandoned her when she needed me most. Some of our mutual friends have taken her side, while others understand my position. My parents were shocked. They said I should give her more chances and family should stick together. I argued that I'm still family, but I also have a right to protect my home and my well-being. Since then, Emily has moved into a temporary shelter and is trying to get into a halfway house. We talk occasionally, but she's still resentful. Daniel supports my decision, though he's also worried about the strain this has put on my sister and whether it will affect my relationship with my parents. I feel guilty because I know she's in a fragile state, but I also feel like I made the most responsible choice for everyone involved. I'm sharing this here because I don't know if I really am the asshole. I help her get through rehab. I try to set boundaries, and I offered alternatives. Yet, I'm facing backlash from friends, family, and even Emily herself. Was I wrong to refuse to let her stay under my roof after she violated the rules I set? Or was I justified in protecting my home, my partner, and my own mental health? I want to support her recovery, but I also cannot ignore the risks and past patterns that have caused harm before. I just don't want to feel like I failed her or that I'm a bad sister for making what I thought was the right decision. AITA for refusing to let my father attend my wedding after he humiliated me in front of my friends. I, 30F, have had a complicated relationship with my father, Greg, 58M, for as long as I can remember. He has always been overbearing and critical, often making jokes at my expense that others might find funny, but always left me feeling embarrassed and small. Growing up, my mother tried to shield me from some of his worst behavior, but the dynamic was never healthy. Despite this, I kept him in my life because he is my dad and my younger brother, Ethan, 26M, relies on him. I got engaged last year to James, 31M, my partner of 6 years. Planning the wedding has been a dream and a source of joy, but it also brought the underlying tensions with my father to the surface. I decided early on that I wanted to have a small, intimate wedding with mostly close friends and immediate family, because I knew that large gatherings would give my father too much opportunity to embarrass me. I hoped keeping it small would allow me to enjoy the day without anxiety. The trouble started a few months ago during the engagement party I hosted at our house. I invited about 20 people, including my closest friends, some extended family, and my parents. Everything was going well until my father began making passive-aggressive comments about the party setup and the food. That alone was irritating, but I was trying to stay calm and not let him ruin the evening. Then, while I was giving a short toast to thank everyone for coming, he interrupted me. He loudly said, "Wow, I didn't know you could put together anything this nice." Usually it's a disaster when she tries to organize something. Everyone laughed, and I froze. I could feel my face burning. I tried to continue, but he kept cutting in with snide remarks, mocking the way I held the microphone and even joking about my outfit. I asked him several times to stop, but he brushed it off and said, "I'm just having fun. Don't be so serious." Later, during casual mingling, he started talking to my friends about my previous relationships, making crude jokes and exaggerating stories that were meant to humiliate me. He implied that I had made poor choices and that I was lucky James stuck around. I was mortified, and several of my friends came up to comfort me. James was furious, but I felt trapped because I didn't want to make a scene that would overshadow the celebration. After the party, I confronted my father privately. I told him that his behavior was unacceptable, humiliating, and inappropriate, especially in front of my friends. He laughed and said, "You need to learn to take a joke. Everyone knows I tease. It's nothing personal." I tried to explain that this wasn't teasing. It was public humiliation, and that it crossed a line, but he refused to acknowledge it. Since that night, I've struggled with whether I can allow him to attend my wedding. My parents and brother are pressuring me to forgive and forget, and claim that excluding him would cause a family rift. My mother said, "It's your wedding, but he's your father. You can't just cut him out over a little embarrassment." Ethan told me that if I don't let him come, he might feel caught in the middle. James, however, supports me fully and says he doesn't want me to subject myself to humiliation on one of the most important days of my life. I've considered setting strict boundaries for him at the wedding, like limiting his interactions, assigning someone to monitor his behavior, or even asking him to sit at a separate table. But I don't think that would prevent him from making snide remarks, and I don't want to spend the entire day stressed and anxious. I feel like my day should be about celebrating love, not enduring insults from my own father. Some friends have suggested that I confront him again and demand a sincere apology before I make a decision. But I fear he would just refuse or try to manipulate the situation, claiming I'm being dramatic or overreacting. I also worry about the message it would send to my brother and other family members if I outright exclude my father. It could create permanent tension. So, AITA for refusing to let my father attend my wedding after he publicly humiliated me at my engagement party. I'm torn between protecting myself and maintaining family appearances. I want to enjoy my wedding without fear of being embarrassed, but I also feel guilty about potentially hurting my family's feelings and creating a rift that could last for years. I've tried to rationalize it by thinking about long-term mental health and emotional safety, but the guilt is heavy. I want to set boundaries, but I also want my family to understand why. I just don't know if my decision would make me unreasonable in the eyes of others, or if it's perfectly valid to prioritize my dignity on a day that's supposed to be one of the happiest in my life. Has anyone dealt with a parent who repeatedly embarrasses or belittles them? And how did you handle in situations that couldn't be avoided, like weddings or large family gatherings? I need guidance on balancing self-respect with family expectations without compromising my own happiness. AITA for refusing to let my best friend move in with me after she lost her apartment, even though she insists we're family. I, 30F, have been living alone in my apartment for about 5 years. I work in tech, make a decent salary, and have been able to comfortably rent in a nice area without much financial stress. My best friend, Lily, 29F, recently lost her apartment due to her landlord selling the building unexpectedly. She came to me asking if she could stay with me for a while until she finds a new place. At first, I thought it might be a week or two, something short-term, but she didn't specify a timeline and immediately started talking about months. I explained that while I wanted to help, my apartment isn't large. It's a one-bedroom, and while I have a living room and kitchen, it's really only set up for one person. I expressed concerns about privacy, space, and the impact on my daily routine. Lily got upset and said that since we're practically like family, I should just make it work and that I wouldn't be asking if she had any other options. I understand that she's in a tough spot, but I also feel like I have the right to maintain boundaries in my own home. When I suggested alternative options like helping her find a short-term sublet, paying for a week or two in an Airbnb, or even helping her look for roommates, she dismissed all of them. She said it wouldn't feel like real support if I wasn't letting her stay with me and that I was being selfish for not prioritizing her needs. I try to explain that I want to help, but I also have my own life and space that I need to protect. The issue escalated when she started implying that I wasn't a good friend because I wouldn't let her move in. She said things like, "I've been there for you through everything, and now you can't even help me? And friends don't say no in situations like this. I reminded her that I've supported her emotionally, helped her move, and covered bills and emergencies in the past. But she said those situations were different. She claims this is about survival, which made me feel guilty, but I still couldn't reconcile it with my own needs. We've argued several times over this. She's been very persistent, saying that she doesn't have family to turn to and that I'm her closest person. So refusing is almost like abandoning her. I reminded her that I'm not her only option and that she could explore temporary housing, staying with other friends, or contacting local housing assistance programs. She said those are less personal and not the same as staying with someone you care about. I also set some conditions, hoping to compromise. I said she could stay for a very short period, like a couple of nights, until she got something arranged, but she insisted on as long as needed, which I felt was unrealistic. She said I was being controlling and that I was letting my fear of inconvenience prevent me from being a true friend. I tried explaining that I have work, routines, and personal space that can't be compromised indefinitely, but she responded that I was overthinking and making it about me. Our mutual friends have weighed in, and their opinions are split. Some say I'm completely right for setting boundaries in my own home, especially since my apartment isn't suitable for long-term cohabitation with another adult. Others say I should just make it work for the sake of friendship, and that I'm being heartless by refusing. My family also chimed in, with my mother suggesting I should be generous and supportive, and my father reminding me that it's okay to set limits when someone else's needs conflict with mine. The situation is affecting my relationship with Lily. She has started avoiding me, sending passive-aggressive texts, and posting on social media about friends who only care about themselves, which I know is about me. I feel hurt because I genuinely care about her, but I also feel pressured and stressed. I'm trying to balance helping her in meaningful ways without compromising my own comfort and boundaries. I've thought about offering financial help for temporary housing, helping her pack or move, or even lending her some money for deposits. But she says that doesn't count and that being there in person is what matters. I'm worried that if I give in, it will set a precedent for other situations where she expects me to put her needs above mine. At the same time, I don't want to destroy our friendship or make her feel abandoned. So, AITA for refusing to let my best friend move in with me after she lost her apartment. Even though she insists we're like family and I should make room for her indefinitely. AITA for confronting my sister over her parenting choices at my own wedding. I, 32F, recently got married to my husband, Alex, 34M, in a small ceremony that included our immediate families and a few close friends. From the beginning, I wanted it to be intimate and relatively stress-free, and for the most part was. However, a major conflict arose with my sister, Jenna, 29F, and it has left me questioning whether I overstepped. Jenna is a single mother to a 5-year-old, Ethan. I've always admired her resilience, but I also know that her parenting style can be very hands-off, particularly with behavior in public. She tends to let Ethan do whatever he wants without many boundaries, often leading to him being loud, disruptive, or even rude, especially when she's distracted. Before the wedding, I had gently tried to communicate our expectations. I told her that the ceremony itself was going to be quiet and structured, and that she needed to ensure Ethan was under control. I offered to provide some activities and toys to keep him occupied, and even suggested she might consider having a family friend babysit him for the portion of the day where decorum was most important. She agreed, but I had some lingering doubts based on past experiences. On the day of the wedding, everything started smoothly. The ceremony went without a hitch, and Ethan was surprisingly well-behaved during the initial proceedings. But things began to unravel during the reception. Ethan immediately gravitated toward the dessert table and started taking handfuls of candy and cake before anyone had been served. He climbed onto chairs and ran around between tables, occasionally knocking over drinks. Jenna seemed to notice but didn't intervene. She was chatting with other relatives and laughing when I gave her a glance that clearly meant, "Please handle this." As the evening went on, Ethan got more energetic and started shouting and jumping on the dance floor. At one point, he grabbed a decorative centerpiece and started running with it, almost knocking over a small child who was seated at a nearby table. That was the moment I decided I had to step in. I approached Jenna and told her firmly that she needed to control her child, that it wasn't appropriate behavior in my wedding. She laughed at first, saying I was overreacting and that Ethan was just being a kid. I told her no, this was not acceptable, and that if she couldn't handle it, I would have to intervene myself. She got defensive and accused me of trying to embarrass her in front of our family. That accusation stung, but I didn't back down. I ended up taking Ethan aside and explaining to him that he needed to calm down and follow the rules. He eventually complied, but the tension between me and Jenna was palpable for the rest of the evening. She barely spoke to me after that and spent most of the night glaring or muttering under her breath. Since the wedding, several family members have reached out privately with mixed opinions. Some think I was justified because it was my day and children need boundaries, while others feel I overstepped and that I should have allowed Jenna to manage her own child, even if it was stressful for me. Jenna has since told me that I humiliated her and that our relationship will be strained for a long time. She's refusing to attend future family events unless I apologize and promises not to interfere with Ethan again. I feel torn because I want to maintain our relationship, but I also feel strongly that leaving a 5-year-old unsupervised and disruptive at my wedding was unacceptable. I've tried to explain to her that my actions were not meant to attack her parenting, but rather to maintain order and ensure that all guests, including other children, were safe. She sees it differently, claiming that I undermined her authority in front of everyone and that I have no right to dictate how she raises her child. To complicate things, some extended family members have subtly taken sides. A few have praised me for handling the situation and say I did what needed to be done, while others have quietly criticized me for causing a scene. Alex is supportive of my decision, saying it was necessary to protect the integrity of our wedding and to prevent accidents or injuries. However, he also admits that the way I approached Jenna could have been handled more diplomatically. I keep replaying the scenario in my head. I wonder if I could have handled it differently, perhaps by preemptively arranging for someone to supervise Ethan or by speaking to Jenna privately earlier in the evening. At the same time, the thought of a child running around unsupervised and causing harm on my wedding day still feels unacceptable. So, AITA here, was I wrong to confront my sister directly about her child's behavior during my wedding, even though it caused tension and may have strained our relationship? Or was I justified in prioritizing the safety and enjoyment of my guests over avoiding a confrontation with a family member? I really want to hear honest opinions because I'm struggling to see where the line between enforcing rules and respecting my sister's parenting should be drawn. AITA for refusing to let my brother's family stay with me during a difficult time and now facing backlash from my parents? This all started about 6 months ago when my younger brother, Tom, who is married to Lisa and has 2 kids aged 4 and 6, hit a rough patch. Tom lost his job unexpectedly, and Lisa has been under immense stress because her parents live out of state, and her work schedule doesn't allow much flexibility. Naturally, the first thing my parents did was suggest that Tom and his family move in with me for a while. I have a modest 2-bedroom apartment, which I've worked hard to make a comfortable space, and I also work long hours. At first, I thought I could help them out for a short time, maybe a week or 2, but as they started to hint that it might be a few months, I became uneasy. I have never been close to Tom and Lisa in terms of daily life. We see each other on holidays and maybe a birthday here and there, but our parenting styles, daily routines, and even personal habits clash significantly. My apartment isn't huge, and sharing it with 4 extra people seemed like it would be chaotic. I explained to my parents that while I wanted to help, having them live with me for an extended period would be incredibly stressful and could strain my work and personal life. I offered other options like helping them find short-term rental solutions, contributing financially to a hotel, or helping with daycare for the kids. I thought that would be a reasonable compromise, but my parents weren't satisfied. Eventually, Tom approached me directly. He was clearly anxious and stressed, and he made it sound like they had no other options. He said Lisa couldn't handle her workload along with the kids, and staying with me would relieve all their stress. I tried to be honest and explained that my apartment really wasn't suitable for a long-term stay, especially with two energetic kids in a space meant for me alone. I even offered to help with babysitting occasionally, which he declined, saying it wouldn't be enough. At that point, I thought I had made my position clear, but it became apparent that Tom and Lisa were deeply offended by my refusal. They said I was being selfish and that families should support each other in times of need. Things escalated when my parents called me after I refused the last suggestion to let them move in. They were visibly upset and accused me of being unkind and not valuing family bonds. My mom said that I was prioritizing my comfort over my brother's well-being, and my dad implied that I was shirking my responsibilities as a sibling. They said I had been selfish all my life, and that this was proof of my lack of compassion. I tried to explain that I had no problem helping, just not in a way that would disrupt my living situation permanently, but they didn't seem to understand. It's been about a month since then, and the tension hasn't died down. My parents have stopped inviting me to family gatherings, and Tom and Lisa only communicate with me when they need something, often with a subtle guilt trip embedded in their messages. I've received several long texts from my parents explaining how disappointed they are and reminding me that family is supposed to stick together, which makes me feel guilty, even though I firmly believe that having them stay in my apartment for an extended period would have been a logistical nightmare and emotionally draining. I've also started to notice that my own friends and coworkers are now aware of the situation, and some have weighed in, suggesting I might be overreacting and that I should make sacrifices for family. On my side, I'm exhausted by the constant pressure and the feeling that I'm being judged for setting boundaries. I do feel guilty sometimes, especially when I see my nieces and nephews struggling with their parents' stress. But I also know that I've offered help in ways that don't involve completely appending my life, like contributing financially, helping with childcare on certain days, or assisting with the job search. I just didn't want to compromise my living space and personal well-being. Now, every time I bring up the situation, my parents immediately shift to moralizing, saying I'm selfish or uncaring. Tom and Lisa occasionally send passive-aggressive messages about how families should help each other, which I find frustrating because I'm actively trying to help, just not in the way they envision. Even my friends seem divided. Some say I should just let them stay for a little while to avoid family drama, while others say I am right to maintain boundaries. Honestly, I feel like I've tried to meet them halfway, but I'm being painted as the villain simply for saying no to living together. I love my family, and I want to support them, but I don't think that means sacrificing my mental health, personal space, and daily routine for months. I wonder if I really am being unreasonable or if my parents and brother are being unfair by expecting me to host them long-term. I also worry that refusing will permanently damage my relationships, which is why I'm second-guessing myself, even though I'm sure that opening my apartment for months would have been unsustainable. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother and his family stay with me for an extended period, even though they're going through a tough time and my parents think I should. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.